Hello everyone, this is Varish back again, and welcome to our second video in the series of chemistry. In our first video, we discussed about an introduction to water atoms, water molecules, water elements, and water compounds. Atoms are the smallest particles present in the universe. Now, atoms come together to join together to form elements and molecules and even compounds. Elements are substances which are really pure and are made up of only one type of atom, like carbon, hydrogen, etc. And molecules, they might be made up of only one type of atom or even two types of atoms. And elements and molecules come together to form larger compounds, which are a mixture of substances. So, in today's video, let us dive deep into the structure of an atom. So, as we know, an atom is the smallest particle which makes up the matter in the universe. It has this very interesting structure inside it. So, let us deal with the structure. So, as you can see over here in this picture, you can see the neutrons, the protons, which are present in the nucleus, and the electrons. So, from this picture, we get to know that an atom has its three parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, as we know, in our cell, in biology, you might have learned about a human cell or even a plant or an animal cell. There is a center nucleus in that. Similarly, there is a center nucleus in the atom, and then the rest, and in that nucleus there are neutrons and protons, and these electrons are revolving around the nucleus. Just like the Earth revolves around the solar system, around the sun, similarly these electrons revolve around the nucleus, and the nucleus has neutrons and protons which have no movement. And to tell you an interesting fact, 99.99999% of an atom is empty. So 99.999% of an atom is empty. You hear that? That's really great. So you might have to imagine, in that smallest atom, these small particles are really small, because 99.99% is empty. Then only 0.00001% has to be filled with these things, and then it's very difficult to imagine that these are very small. Now let's dive deep into the structure of an atom. Now, as we know, the atom has three parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons, and the nucleus has the protons and neutrons. Let us now study about these protons and neutrons. So let's go. Protons, as we see over here, they have a positive charge. So protons are charged particles. They have some kind of charge flowing through them, and they have a positive charge flowing through them. So they are the positive side of an atom. And then they define an element. Now, what does this sentence mean? This is really important, because all elements, as I discussed in the previous video, are dependent on the protons. Now, suppose take hydrogen, for example. It has an atomic number of 1. Now, what is an atomic number? In the periodic table of elements, you might have seen a small number at the top of an element. That number, according to that number, the elements are arranged, and that number is called the atomic number, and the atomic number defines the number of protons in one atom of that element. So if you take one atom of hydrogen, we see that in the periodic table hydrogen has 1. So in an atom of hydrogen, there would be 1 proton. And similarly, taking carbon, it would be 6 in the periodic table. So we can be sure that in one atom of carbon there will be 6 protons. So protons are very important in defining an element. So all the elements even are based on the protons, and if at least one proton is added or removed, then the whole element changes. So protons are very important in an element, and now they're present in the nucleus. So the nucleus is really small, as shown here, and they're present in the nucleus, and they do not have any kind of movement. So the protons have a positive charge, then they define an element. So the number of protons in an atom is the atomic number of that element, as we have seen. And then it is present in the nucleus and it has no movement. Next comes the neutron. Now, neutron is also present in the nucleus and it has no charge. So, like proton is a charged particle, it's a positive charged particle. Neutron is a no charged particle. So it basically doesn't have any charge and it's present in the nucleus with no movement. And here is something interesting about the neutron. They add up with protons to form an isotope. Now, what is an isotope and how do they add up with these protons? So we know that an element has protons, neutrons, and electrons because an element contains an atom. The protons would be fixed for one particular element. Suppose let's take carbon, it would have compulsorily 6 protons, but the number of neutrons and electrons change. Now, forget about this electrons, but when we talk about this neutrons, it might start from zero neutrons, then 1 neutron, then 2 neutrons, and all that. And the number of neutrons might vary. And these neutrons and protons come up together to form an isotope. Now, isotope is nothing but different forms of that element. So, if the protons are same, then the neutrons might vary. They will vary, and each variety of that element. I mean to say, if there are 6 protons and 0 neutrons, then it would be an isotope of carbon 6. Then 6 protons and 1 neutron, 6 plus 1, 7, an isotope of carbon 7. And these neutrons help to make these isotopes. And these isotopes are very important, and we can even calculate the mass of an atom using these isotopes. So we'll deal about isotopes in some other video, maybe our next video. But for now, we need to remember that neutrons, which are no charged particles, can vary in number, unlike the protons. So when they vary in number, if we add the protons and neutrons, we can get different forms of this element. So neutrons add up with protons to form an isotope. Now, electrons have a negative charge. So electrons have a negative charge, and then they revolve around the nucleus and they have a lot of kinetic energy. Now, what does this mean? So you have seen the nucleus, which has the neutrons and protons. Now, if the electrons revolve around the nucleus, so when they have a movement around the nucleus, it means that they have a lot of kinetic energy and they're negative charge particles. So you might ask, why do these electrons revolve around the nucleus? Then there's an interesting answer, because protons are positive charged and electrons are negative charged. So as we know, electricity flows from negative charged particles to positive charged particles. So obviously electrons, which have a lot of kinetic energy, would be attracted to the protons. So they revolve. But you might have another question. Why don't these electrons collide with the protons? Because negative charge and positive charge, then negative charge is flowing over there, and then why don't they collide? And there's an interesting physics behind this. You can go and research it in Google. Let me give you a hint. It's all because of electromagnetic force. So electrons have a negative charge. They revolve around the nucleus and they have a lot of kinetic energy, a lot. So that's why they revolve around the nucleus. Now, to summarize what we have learned the structure of an atom, what is inside an atom, and we know that it's 99.99999% empty. So the rest 0.000001% contains all these different things. Now, you see a nucleus and the electrons revolving. Now, in the nucleus is very small. It's the center of an atom and it contains neutrons and protons. Protons are positively charged. They're present in the nucleus. They define an element, that is, the number of protons in an atom is equal to the atomic number, which is shown in the periodic table, as we have discussed, and they don't have any movement. Now, neutrons, which are present in the nucleus, have no charge, basically, and then they are present in the nucleus with no movement, and then they add up with the protons, as I've told you, to form isotopes. Now we'll deal about isotopes in our next video, about these isotopes, ions and all. And then the electrons, which are negative charged particles, revolve around the nucleus, and because there are protons, they revolve and they don't collide because of electromagnetic force. You can go out and research for yourself. So this brings us to the end of our video. Hope you liked our video. In our next video, we might be talking about elements, isotopes and ions. So stay tuned, and until next time, goodbye.